Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to RightScale's latest webinar, Cloud Management Solutions for the Enterprise. As usual, we're going to start off this webinar with just a few poll questions. So if you wouldn't mind just answering the questions when they pop up on your screen. And all answers will be displayed to everyone on the webinar. So hopefully you find this information useful. You should have the first poll up. This talks about just general cloud usage. So what, if anything, are you doing today? Okay, looks like over half of you have not done anything yet or are just at the exploratory phase, so that's actually good. So there'll be some good overview information that you'll learn about today. Next poll should be flashing up here in a second. And this one's more about why you're thinking about the cloud. So if you wouldn't mind just clicking on the answer there, that would be appreciated. Okay, the second poll is done. Looks like lots of needs around IT agility and saving money. Okay, on to the third poll. Now we're going to get into specific interests in the cloud management system. So there's actually two questions related to this. The first one should be up now. Looks like this one's in, and lots of needs around system-level management and automation. Okay, and last but not least, follow-up question here on management systems. Great. It looks like our last poll is finished, and lots of interest around choice among stacks and various different cloud infrastructures. Excellent. Well, appreciate everyone participating in those polls. Hopefully you found the results helpful. Great. So let's get started. Before we dive in, wanted to quickly just highlight the Cloud Computing Expo conference next week. So for those of you that find yourselves in Santa Clara or plan on joining, please come see us. We're actually hosting our third RightScale user meetup on November 3rd. So that is the Wednesday of the Cloud Computing Expo. So it is affiliated with the show. It's completely free. So you can register at rightscale.com/meetup. There'll be lots of stuff going on there, including several enterprise customers speaking, talking about use cases and their experiences, as well as a variety of different breakout sessions, including one entirely dedicated to security, which of course is a very popular topic that enterprises are concerned with. So hope to see you at Cloud Expo. So let's dive in. I want to first introduce our panel. This is Josh Frazier. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for RightScale. I'm joined today by Brian Adler. Brian's one of our Senior Solutions Architects out of the RightScale Services Group. You may recognize the name if you've read any of our white papers. So Brian's one of our most senior architects and is one of the thought leaders here around best practices in the cloud. On the Q&A log is Hunter Williams. Hunter's in charge of strategic accounts here at RightScale. And as usual, we'll be answering questions throughout the webinar. So please use the chat window in your GoToWebinar viewer and send in your questions at any point. We'll be answering them on air throughout the webinar, and then Hunter will be responding directly in the chat. We'll also be recording both the audio and the video of this webinar. It'll be available at rightscale.com/webinars, and you can also find the archive of all of our past webinars there as well. So there's lots of good stuff to take a look at. It usually takes about 24 hours after the webinar is complete. So you can look for this webinar up online tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening. So the agenda today, we're going to very quickly introduce RightScale. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the platform, but just to set the audience and for those that may be new to RightScale in the cloud, we'll quickly introduce what we're all about. And then immediately get into cloud management for the enterprise and specifically talk about the methodology that we take when approaching cloud computing and enterprise management, and also the perspective that we see a lot of enterprise companies taking. Then we're going to dive in and talk about a few specific solutions, so some real customer use cases. We have a few that we're going to share around consumer applications, and then we have one in particular we're going to spend a lot of time and toggle back and forth between demonstrations within the RightScale dashboard as well as slides around corporate IT and specifically this notion of self-service IT. So with that, we'll get started, and just as a reminder, don't hesitate to ask any questions. Just send them into the chat window at any time. So RightScale, for those that are not familiar, what we're all about. So RightScale is a cloud management system. It's delivered as a software as a service, and we've been doing this for quite some time. So specifically over 4 years now, RightScale launched about 1 month after EC2 launched in September of 2006. We have a lot of experience launching and managing servers. Specifically over 1.5 million servers have been launched and managed on our platform. And our platform is behind the largest production deployments in the cloud to date. Many of you may have seen in the press and a lot of activity in the cloud and RightScale specifically around social applications and social games. So companies like Zynga and EA and Playfish are all deployed in the cloud using the RightScale platform. But what often doesn't get talked about as much is the enterprise customers. So what you see here is just a sampling of some of the very many enterprise customers that are doing production deployments in the cloud today using the RightScale platform. Where we fit in within the ecosystem. So RightScale is the orchestration and automation layer between the applications you want to run and the cloud resource pools you want to run them on. There's a couple key principles that we keep in mind when delivering this service. First is around this notion of complete lifecycle management. RightScale is not just about getting up and running quickly. Of course, we certainly help you do that. But it's around helping you through all of the common procedures around the lifecycle of your application. So that includes remediation. It includes management around running patches. It includes user control, so on and so forth. Additionally, we have a whole host of automation solutions that significantly lower the overhead that a system administrator would otherwise have to do. Part of the principle of the platform is to keep it as open and transparent as possible. What that means is that from a cloud provider up, if a cloud themselves are extending native tools, RightScale will support them within the dashboard. And further, if an ISV is looking to make their solutions available in the cloud, we will work with them extensively to configure their apps in a form of a server template on RightScale. And you're going to hear more about that later on in the demonstration. And then finally, the platform is designed to be portable. So you're not bound to any one particular cloud provider or any one specific resource pool. It's very easy to move around and take advantage of multiple configurations on multiple resource pools based on whatever your needs may be. So the core focus of the business and how we approach customers is all about 3 main things: agility, choice, and control. On the agility front, our methodology involves what we call server templates. You'll hear more about server templates in a second, but simply put, they reduce complexity significantly. Secondly, we take a systems-level approach. So RightScale is not just about managing servers. It's about dealing with multi-server, multi-tier architectures, complete with networking and storage and security configurations that can be managed as one. The platform looks to automate as much as it possibly can. So things that otherwise a sysadmin would have to do manually can be set up to be remediated by the platform automatically. As I mentioned earlier, choice is a big fundamental tenet of what RightScale is all about. This includes both multi-cloud and multi-resource pools within a single cloud provider, but also the ability to take advantage of configuration assets that we provide you, that you write your own, or that are provided by the ecosystem of ISP partners that we work with. And then last but certainly not least, it's tough to have a conversation with an enterprise customer where control and security doesn't come up. So a big part of what RightScale focuses on, and what you're going to hear a lot about today, is how we add additional control and security around your cloud deployments. That has to do with isolation of resources, user policies, user access and roles, cost accounting mechanisms, and reporting. So with that, let's move on now to cloud computing for the enterprise. And I want to introduce you to, first, the perspective that we see a lot of enterprises taking. What we've outlined here is the typical flow when we sit down with an enterprise and let them better understand how they can take advantage of the cloud. And it starts with thinking about the landscape as not a single application, but as a portfolio of applications. So it's very seldom that an enterprise only has to worry about a single app. So you're dealing with a portfolio of multiple different applications. Each company and each application is going to be subject to a specific set of filtering requirements. So things like performance and security and cost and reliability. And what the cloud's all about is not a replacement strategy, but a way to complement what you're already doing. So to complement your internal data center and colo resources with 3 different types of cloud resource pools. Those include public clouds, those include private clouds, and then from providers such as Amazon, virtual private clouds. So what you're left with for enterprises that are taking advantage of cloud computing on RightScale is a situation where you can take an application, apply the necessary filtering requirements that are unique to that application and unique to your organization, and deploy that app in whatever cloud resource pool or traditional resource pool makes the most sense. Sometimes that means that an application is not appropriate to deploy in the cloud, and that's just fine. In fact, we encourage customers to, again, think beyond any single application and think about their whole portfolio, because the reality is any company, large or small, has an application that can benefit from cloud computing today. So let's now talk a little bit about the methodology, and this is important to understand because it's going to be a foundational component of everything that you're going to see in the dashboard and everything that you're going to hear about on the slides. RightScale takes a fundamentally different approach towards deploying and managing in the cloud. It's this notion of server templates versus dealing with machine images. And a very simple analogy that I like to use is the difference between an iTunes playlist and burning a CD. So burning a CD would be the equivalent of creating a machine image. So for those of you that have worked directly with Amazon already, creating an AMI where you have to bundle the entire software stack into a static image. It's not that that is necessarily difficult, but it can be prone to error, and it requires time and effort to do that, particularly when you have to do it over and over again. A server template is analogous to a playlist. A server template is a series of instructions and components that define what you want that server to be. And what happens when you launch servers with a server template is that instance will be dynamically configured at boot time to the specs of the server template. By doing it that way, you have this notion of built-to-order servers, or a highly repeatable process that's very easy to maintain because you're not having to worry about rebundling images every single time and configuring them manually at root. Why do we take this approach? Well, it's really a couple key things. Server templates are the key to automation. Server templates share common inputs, which are environment variables within your system. And because of that, they allow you to not only launch servers, but dynamically configure them in context. And what that means is you're not only launching a resource, but you're bringing that into a productive state as part of a system oriented around a specific use case. Because server templates are component-driven, you can reuse these over and over again. So you have a lot of agility when it comes to taking a single server definition and applying it to multiple situations across multiple resource pools. So procurement time and configuration time becomes very, very quick. Just like changing things on your iTunes playlist, they're very easy to maintain. So over the course of the life cycle, whether that's doing a revision on your app, patch management, changing some specific environment variable, all it requires is changing a single script or an input within a server template. You don't have to rebundle images. And then lastly, this notion of transparency and control. Everything within a server template is completely transparent. We provide these scripts at source, and you're free to clone and customize or add to them as you see fit. And then lastly, everything that's done to that server template is completely auditable. So you as an enterprise organization have complete transparency into what's going on within this environment and the ability to customize it to meet your specs and internal compliance needs. So now that you have a sense of the methodology, let's talk about some enterprise use cases. And what we're going to do here is go through a sequence, and each of these are kind of going to build off of each other, and we're going to show you how this is captured in the dashboard. And we want to start first with a couple enterprise consumer applications. So here are two of our customers, American Girl. Some of you, if you have daughters, may be familiar with the American Girl doll, and Sony Music. So both of these companies have a series of challenges related to their consumer applications. In the case of American Girl, you're talking about a major branding campaign and a major promotion leading up to the holiday buying season. Here's a physical doll that is also part of this transmedia program, which essentially means taking that intellectual property and applying it to a new medium. So what often happens with these big campaigns is IT is always kind of the last department to know. So the branding folks and the marketing folks are figuring out all the launch schedules and the timing, and IT is often left out of the loop until the 11th hour. Further, these are subject to flash crowds, so it's nearly impossible to predict the actual demand, so it's very, very difficult to do the capacity planning. And then finally, they almost always involve revisions. So some very common challenges around big brand promotions that enterprises face on consumer apps. In the case of Sony Music, here's a situation where Sony is managing and maintaining and marketing hundreds of different sites for their various artists, as well as the online stores. As you might imagine, although the applications are very different, so the BritneySpears.com app is different than Bob Dylan, is different than Billy Joel, the underlying architecture and the infrastructure configuration is very similar. So Sony's challenges are around how do we provision these sites rapidly with guaranteed results. Similar to American Girl, how do we deal with these unknown demands? So Michael Jackson dies, is our site going to go down, or is it automated to remediate accordingly to the traffic needs? And then finally, because they're running e-commerce on the cloud, they're subject to specific requirements around PCI. So using what we call RightScale deployments, and we're going to talk about deployments next in the demo, you have the ability to create these systems that will automatically reconfigure themselves based on remediation rules that you set up. And furthermore, you can take these deployments and break them into logical tiers. So in the case of this PCI compliance, you can take your database tier and run that on-premise while your application and front ends are running in the cloud. So with that, we want to introduce our first demonstration here. And what I'm going to do is turn it over to Brian, and he's going to take you through 4 key areas. First, he's going to introduce this notion of a deployment, and a deployment is a RightScale term for a system. So this is a unit, a logical grouping of servers that you're managing as one. Next, we're going to get into the resource partitioning and how using RightScale, enterprises can isolate around different cloud resource pools by project team, by individual, by geography. Next, we'll talk about the account management. This becomes really important from a cost accounting and tracking standpoint. And then finally, we'll finish up in this first demo with a little bit about user control, so user permissioning and how they can be invited and be a part of each of these RightScale accounts. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Brian, and he's going to dive into the dashboard.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Well, in the first part of this demonstration, I would like to delve a little bit deeper into the concept of deployments that Josh mentioned previously. And in this particular enterprise account that I'm logged into, there's multiple child accounts, which we'll take a look at in just a moment. But what I'd like to point out here is this, in addition to the default deployment, there's the enterprise staging deployment. So if we go ahead and click on that, we can take a look at what is comprised within this enterprise staging deployment. And as Josh alluded to earlier, you can have multi-tier, multi-server deployments and basically systems of servers, and that's what this represents. This is an IBM middleware stack, which we'll use throughout the demos that we're going to show you today, with a load balancing front end, a WebSphere application server in the middle, and an IBM DB2 Express server running on the back end. But what's interesting here is that these servers are all grouped together as one logical entity and can be managed and maintained and controlled as such within the RightScale dashboard. Now, Josh also talked a little bit about the resource pools and how different resource pools are available for different accounts. And for example, for this published master account you see here in the pull down in the upper right, for the published master account, if we go ahead and we look at the clouds menu, you'll see all of the resource pools, the 4 AWS regions that are available for this particular account. So this particular account can fire off servers in any of these 4 resource pools or 4 AWS regions. Now what we'll do next is we'll look at a child account in this account, and in this case we'll look at this hybrid cloud E, and you'll see that for its particular cloud menu, it has the 4 AWS regions, but it also has this additional private cloud. So you can basically assign multiple resource pools to individual accounts, and those accounts can correspond to maybe a project or a department within your organization, or however you best break those out, but you can assign individual resource pools to the accounts that make sense for you.
So each account within RightScale represents an isolated environment, and you can have a specific region or a specific set of resource pools from various different providers associated with each account.
Exactly, and that's the intent of the enterprise account and the categorization, if you will, of those child accounts. So now we're back at the published master, and we'll look at some enterprise settings here. Under the settings menu, we have the enterprise submenu. And what this shows on the accounts tab here is this shows all of the accounts and the child accounts that are part of this overarching enterprise account. So each of these columns, we have the name of the account, obviously. This next, or the third column here is the active servers, and this basically shows you all of the server instances that are currently running within the context of that particular account. And then there's some run rate information. The next few are, we have the current run rate, which is basically how many servers are running right now and the rates that they're incurring, the charges that they're incurring. You have the details from the prior month, how much you've spent the prior month. You then have month to date, and then the projection, which is a combination of the month to date and your current run rate. Now this column here is users and invitations. And each account can have a differing number of users, and that might correspond obviously to members of a particular department or members of a particular project. And the invitations is how many pending invitations there are for that account. One of the other aspects of the RightScale platform is that if you are a user with the correct permissions, you can invite other users into your account, and you can specify the permissions that they have when they accept that invitation. And then the last column you see here is the cloud credentials, and the green dot there basically just means that the credentials are valid for that particular account.
So Brian, you have it looks like 5 accounts that are associated under this umbrella published master, and real-time visibility into the consumption on each account.
Exactly. You can get an exact track of how much each of these accounts are spending currently and how much they had obviously in the prior month and month to date exactly.
So that level of visibility may not always be a good thing. But I think it is pretty interesting because, I mean, before it's dealing with this very arbitrary budget process and then assigning a specific budget amounts, before resources are actually consumed. Here you have the ability to actually get real-time run rates. And assuming you isolate these accounts by project team, you can, for the first time, assign down to the hour the exact IT cost to a particular project.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Interesting. So talk a little bit about sharing groups. What are those?
Sure, well, and we'll see those again later on, but sharing groups are basically an easy private way to share configuration assets like server templates and write scripts between your accounts and or your departments or project teams, for example. We see these used all the time in large organizations to allow them to control which enterprise assets are available to those individual departments within the larger overarching organization. Additionally, I'd like to go ahead and take a look at the Users tab, and we'll see what this will show is all of the users that are in all of the accounts within this enterprise account. And the interesting thing here is that it shows the roles and responsibilities of each of these users. So we'll take as an example, we'll take their Andrew account here. And if you can see on the published master, you can see that Andrew has virtually all permissions on this published master. He can log into servers, he can publish things to the library, he can create new server objects, etc. But if you take a look at Hybrid Cloud C or Hybrid Cloud E for Andrew, you see that he's just an observer. So perhaps that's a different project where he's going to be brought in as an auditor, or maybe he can use it as a reference to work on his project. He's not allowed necessarily to make changes to those particular projects, but he can go ahead and observe and audit them. So this allows you to create multiple roles and responsibilities for each individual user within these enterprise accounts.
Great, thanks, Brian. So let's jump back over to the slides now. And just to summarize what Brian just took us through, a couple key components here. One, you have this notion of deployments. And just as a reminder, deployments are systems that can be managed as a single unit. So multi-tier, multi-server architecture is complete with environment variables, shared networking configuration, security, and storage. In addition to deployments, you have the option of creating multiple isolated environments. And these can be used for individuals, for project teams, for divisions. Each of those environments can have specific access to one or more cloud resource pools. So we see this used quite often when it comes to larger enterprise organizations that, for example, may have a division that's overseas. So they may have a European division that's concerned with data privacy laws because of the U.S. Patriot Act. So here's a way that you can isolate what resource pools are accessible to a specific account within RightScale. You have an easy way to share configuration assets by creating this bridge between environments called a sharing group or an account group. They're the same thing within RightScale. And there you can actually publish, and we'll show you how to do this, you can publish configuration assets into that sharing group and allow any folks that you invite to it to pull those assets down. And then lastly, you have the ability to set user roles and responsibilities at an account level. And that also is very commonly used by larger organizations because oftentimes you'll have an individual that may have more than one responsibility. So they may be working on multiple projects, but their roles may vary project to project. So here's a way that you can isolate their responsibilities to that specific project at the account structure within RightScale. So before we move on, we got a couple of great questions already, so just want to take a couple here that are within the context of what we're talking about. So Brian, this one is around kind of system level management and specifically the installation using server templates. So if a server is installed and configured at boot time, where does it take installation packages from? Do I have to keep and run a local repo, or is it downloading them from the internet?
RightScale maintains a mirror of all the standard repos. For example, for our Linux distributions, such as CentOS and Ubuntu, we mirror all of the existing repos for the standard packages. So for example, if you guys need to install PHP or Perl or whatever it may be, we can pull that from the standard repo. Now we also have the ability within the RightScale platform on the server template level to specify individual SVN repos or GitHub repositories so that you can pull your application code, or if you have any specific packages that aren't available in the standard repos, you can pull them from your own private one as well.
Great, and another one while we're here, if you can touch upon more multi-tiers. So how do the multi-tiers know about each instance at startup, and where does IP, et cetera, is dynamic?
Got it, understood. So in that multi-tier IBM WebSphere stack that we looked at, we had a load balancing front end, we had a WebSphere application server in the middle, and a database on the back end. And the way that these are able to discover each other, if you will, is through the server template, and we have the concept of inputs both at the deployment level and also the server level, and we'll see those in a moment. And what we have the ability to do is set essentially a host name, for example, the front end load balancer or the database back end. And when those servers come into existence, they can do a DNS query and find those individual instances. Typically, you only need the public IP on your front ends, and everything else can be done on the private IP, therefore giving you some extra security and basically inaccessibility from the external internet.
And that really is what we refer to when we talk about launching servers in context. So these server templates are sharing common inputs within RightScale, and when they're configuring servers, that server will know not only what it is it needs to install, but also what system it's a part of.
Exactly. When they come up, they know not only what they're supposed to be when they grow up, but also who they're supposed to talk to on both ends. Yep.
Great. Well, super. We'll keep the questions coming, please. We'll continue to answer them throughout. So with that, let's move on now and move up to a little bit more advanced within a corporate IT department. And what we're going to share with you next is this notion of self-service IT. And specifically, this is a use case with one of our customers, Eli Lilly. Many of you are probably familiar with them, so they're a major global pharmaceutical company. And Eli Lilly had a couple goals in mind when we first started working with them. They, like all pharmaceutical companies, are dealing with research scientists that are located all over the world. So in the case of Lilly, hundreds and hundreds of research scientists that need access to resources. Lilly wanted to create a way to extend to them through a web interface, a self-service environment where they could access multiple application stacks, and also give them a way to deploy these environments on multiple IT resource pools. So that was their goal. That's what they wanted to achieve. But they had several requirements that we had to meet in order for this to be a reality for Lilly. The first was around compliance and certification within the builds and systems they were using. And I'm sure this is near and dear to our audience. So pretty typical. Large organizations have a certain way that they need to do things. And just because you're moving to the cloud, you can't sacrifice the roles and what you're piecing together as far as compliance is concerned. So we had to give Lilly a way that they could continue to use their certified builds. The second key requirement was limiting what resource pools these scientists were able to access. This is for reasons such as sensitive data. So if a scientist was working on data that was sensitive and couldn't leave the Lilly domain, they had to ensure that the resource pools they were giving that scientist access to were private clouds and not public resource pools. Third, they wanted a way to track and meter everything that was going on. So they wanted to understand, well, what is the real cost associated with that particular scientist's work or that particular project team? And then finally, they wanted a way to easily share best practices. So for this to work and really deliver real value to the IT group at Lilly, they had to ensure that they had some repeatability and replication that they could take advantage of across hundreds and hundreds of scientists. So the way we addressed some of this, specifically the compliance side of things and how we gave Lilly the ability to adhere to these certified environments, was through a product release that we call RightLink. And RightLink allows you to do two key things. One is to enable custom builds, and then the second is to actually build resource pools, build application stacks from scratch using RightLink tools. And maybe, Brian, I'll let you comment a little bit further about specifically what RightLink is and how customers tend to use it.
Sure, absolutely. Well, RightLink is an open source, RightLink agent is an open source project, so it's readily available for review. So what typically is used in the corporate IT environments in the enterprise is that, like Josh said, oftentimes they'll have their own builds of the images and they need to use those going forward. Even though, for example, we have Write images that support all different flavors of OS, maybe our particular Windows 2003 or Windows 2008 image is not acceptable for that particular enterprise customer. So what we allow them to do is, using the RightLink agent, you can install that on your image, install that on your instance. You can then rebundle that instance and create a new image that is based on your corporate blessed image, and it now can communicate with the RightScale platform since RightLink is now built in.
So RightLink was actually released publicly earlier this year, but the Lilly program that you're about to see took advantage of an early release of RightLink. So part of what drove this release was Lilly's requirement to make sure that they had the ability to use compliant and certified builds. So a very, very key tool when it comes to enterprises deploying in the cloud with RightScale. So what did Lilly do here? Well, they came up with this product internally that they're calling the IT Vending Machine. And the slide that you see here actually came from Lilly, so we're very grateful to them for doing this. And this is what they used to evangelize to the executives at Lilly what they had done. These obviously aren't the application stacks that the Lilly scientists are using. They're not off playing games. But it does capture the concept, we think, quite well, which is a scientist can log in to an environment and get greeted with one or more pre-configured systems that were published there, and you'll see how you go about publishing here in a second in the next demo, but were published into those environments by Lilly's central IT group. The scientists, when they access, have one option: start. So they can, on their own, click Run, and these environments will instantiate and configure themselves and become available in a matter of minutes. Furthermore, you get real-time visibility into what's actually been consumed and what's currently running. So very, very powerful stuff in terms of the scientist being able to do things on his or her own, and then also getting a real-time sense of what the associated cost is. So that leads us into our next demo, and we're going to take you through a couple things here that are going to build on this account concept and isolated environment concept that you saw earlier. The first is we're going to show you how you take that IBM middleware stack, so that IBM middleware deployment that Brian showed you in that account, and how you go about changing a few configuration parameters in there. So, the hypothetical here is that something is out of compliance for how you're going to use that, so you need to make some changes to ensure that's within the compliant build parameters of your organization. Then what we're going to do is actually take that system and we're going to publish it out to another environment, to another RightScale account. And the hypothetical there would be, let's say you're publishing this out to your European division. And then finally, we're going to show you how a light user interacts with the RightScale system. And a light user is exactly how these Lilly scientists are set up. When they're logging into RightScale, as you'll see here, what they can do is limited as well as what they can actually see. So with that, we're going to turn it back over to Brian here.
Great. Thank you again, Josh. So as Josh said, sort of the use case that we're going to describe here is, let's say that we're in the Publish Master account and say that this is sort of your corporate IT group, and they've created this enterprise staging deployment which is now ready to be published out to other groups within the organization. And in this particular example, we're going to assume that we need to publish this out to our European department, our European group. And as such, there's a couple tweaks that we need to make to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the enterprise staging deployment that we saw earlier. And the first step is to basically make a copy of this. And you notice in the upper left portion of the dash we have the clone button. So I'm going to go ahead and click clone, which will create an exact copy of this particular deployment.
And worth noting here, Brian, one of the reasons why you can do this is, again, back to that methodology of using server templates. So we're dealing at this layer of abstraction above the machine image, and it's a system that's predefined through a host of different server templates. So you essentially are taking a carbon copy of all the parameters and configuration of that system.
Exactly, and we'll see later on the concept of what we call our multi-cloud images, but basically what Josh said is exactly right, is that these server templates sort of sit above that level, and therefore they're cloud portable and region portable. Now, what you might notice here as well is that all of these servers indicated by these red dots are in the stop state. So what we've done here is we've just made a copy of them, sort of a snapshot of that server configuration. And now that we've done that, we need to go ahead and make some modifications and some customizations to this particular one. So in this example, we're going to change one of the deployment level inputs.
And Brian, talk a little bit more about what an input is.
Sure, absolutely. The inputs you see here are, as I said, deployment level, and these are inputs that are required by all of the server templates within this deployment. And this allows the user to set any defaults that they may have for the servers within this deployment in a single location. These can always be overridden at the server level itself, but this is sort of a place that you can put your catch-all defaults for each of your individual servers. Now, the one that we're interested in here is the private SSH key. And you notice that the key it's currently using is the default AWS US East SSH key. And there's certain aspects of EC2 that are region-specific, and SSH keys are amongst them. So it wouldn't be possible for us to share this with our European group because this key would not be accessible. So as such, we need to swap this key out before we can publish it to that group. So in order to do that, we click the Edit button at the bottom of the screen, which will then bring up an editable version of all of these deployment level inputs. And we're going to then scroll down to that private SSH key input that you saw. And we're going to go to this pull down, and we'll select the AWS EU for our European department. And
so, of course, I could change more inputs here if I wanted to.
Absolutely. This is just a simple example, but absolutely any deployments that you need, any inputs you needed to change for the deployment could be done at this point. And then we go ahead and click Save. So what we've done now is we've cloned the deployment. We've made a modification or multiple modifications, whatever you want to do. And now we're ready to publish this. We're ready to push this out to our European group. So what we need to do is we now need to basically bundle this up in what we call a macro. And a macro is, in essence, an automated way to replicate a deployment. And that is available under the design menu. You'll see here we have the ability to create a new macro. So we'll do that. And you notice that you can build a macro on different components within the system. So we're going to choose to build it based on the deployment. So we click deployment. I want to basically create a macro from that enterprise EMEA deployment that I just specified. I click create, and you'll see that quickly returns, and we get the enterprise macro created. Now I'm going to click the publish to library button because we want to publish this to our European division. And you'll notice that you have the ability to publish to the public library catalog or to share it privately. And the use case that we've been discussing is that we want to share this privately. We want to share it internal to our overarching organization. So we click Share Privately. We then click the Continue button. And now on this page you see the account groups, or equivalent to the sharing groups that we saw earlier, that are available for us to share this asset with. And you can also create a new account group at this point if you don't see the one you need or haven't created the one you need. But for our example, we're going to share it here with the EMA group. We go ahead, and next step is we click on descriptions. We have to give it some sort of information. So we'll call this our, and the long description will be our certified EU IBM stack. And revision notes, let's just put a date on it.
So again, Brian, these sharing groups are essentially just a private library that I can place not only macros but also individual server templates as well as individual scripts.
Exactly. Okay. You can any of the RightScale dashboard assets that you want, you can share using the sharing groups. So then we would click preview and basically checking out, make sure we've done everything correctly and everything looks good. And then at this point we would click the publish button, but for this demo purposes we won't do this. We're going to clutter up our demo account for the next time we use it. So instead what we'll do is we'll jump ahead to an account where we've done this previously and shared basically this exact same macro. And with that we're going to go to this self-service account.
So this is a process, what you're describing right here is exactly what that Lilly IT group went through. So they created their environments and then they macroed them up. Mm-hmm. And then they essentially publish them out to these individual project team accounts in the vending machine.
Right. So sort of I'm the role of the IT guy right now until I click this publish button.
Okay.
And now I'm going to sort of switch over to one of the users, one of the scientists.
So this view would be you're actually a research scientist now and you're set up as a light user in this account?
Exactly. I'm set up as a light user, which basically means that I have a limited access to the components of the RightScale dashboard. So for example, if we take a look here at the settings tab, I only have access to user settings. Before we had the enterprise as well as account-based settings. And under the design menu, we only have the ability to view server templates and view macros. And if we do a quick flip over to the publish master just to compare and contrast it, you can see that under this design menu, we have access to all of the aspects of the RightScale platform. The ability to create new server templates, the ability to publish things to the library, etc. But for the self-service light user, we only have the ability to view the server templates and macros. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select View All under Macros. And what this will do...
So Brian, this looks actually a lot like the vending machine. So it looks like you have one option.
Exactly. If you look at under the actions, you'll see that I have exactly one option, which is to launch these.
So I can't go in as a light user and I can't change any of these configurations.
Exactly. These are locked configurations. Your only option at this point is to launch one of these macros. So the one that we'll use is the same IBM middleware stack that we've been using previously. So we're going to go ahead and click Launch. And we need to select an SSH key for it. And the only one we have in US East is this one.
Now the reason it's asking me for this is this was set by the admin to allow this to be prompt at run.
Exactly. The admin set up to which prompts he wanted the user to have to fill in. Exactly.
But these could have been locked down if the admin wanted.
Absolutely. There could have been a one-click launch and there wouldn't have been any run button here whatsoever. Absolutely. And then it pops up some licensing information, which I guess Josh can probably add some flavor to.
Yeah, actually, that's another good point here. So part of the publishing capability on RightScale's platform is we're catering to not only customers doing internal publishing of their stacks, but also the ISV community. So we work with a wide range of ISVs, including, of course, IBM. So that's the example you're seeing here. And ISVs have the opportunity to publish whatever specific licensing terms that they want. And require acceptance before a user can access these configurations. And also they have the ability to set specific fee structures that RightScale will do the metering and billing for if the ISV so desires. So here's a situation where IBM is requiring positive acceptance of these licensing terms to continue. Now, what's going on here now, Brian?
Sure, Josh. While you were talking, I accepted those two licensing agreements, and then I clicked the Go button. Well, I named it Webinar, I should say, and then clicked the Go button. And what this did is fired off the macro, and the macro went out behind the scenes and created the deployment and the security groups, all the server objects, etc., that are needed. You'll see the last step here is the macro executed successfully. We click OK.
And again, this is because we're using server templates now, right? We're operating above the image in this entire environment, both what needs to be installed on the server, but as well as the necessary configurations at a system level. So security groups, storage, backup locations, replication schedules, that's all predefined in the system that can be executed using that macro.
Exactly. All those were predefined in the macro, in the deployment that we created the macro from, and they are duplicated here. So as you can see, as a result of running that macro, we now have our webinar multi-tier IBM deployment here, and I'm ready to go ahead and launch these servers and make any modifications that I would need to.
Great, thanks, Brian. And we had some more questions come in. One just came in. It's applicable to IBM, it sounds like, which is how long did it take them to figure this out? I assume them as IBM, and did they figure it out on their own, or did RightScale assist them? So these configuration assets that you're seeing us take advantage of here, these server templates, they come from one of three sources. They come from RightScale's own R&D efforts. They come from customers themselves, so customers can, of course, write their own from scratch. And then they come from the ISV community. When you see an ISV partner like IBM in the RightScale library, there's a formal relationship between RightScale and that ISV partner. It's a co-development and co-marketing effort, so we're working directly with IBM in this case to help teach them design and architectural best practices as it relates to deploying in the cloud, and help them understand how to best configure, in this case, this WebSphere DB2 middleware stack to operate in a cloud environment using RightScale. So they led the development efforts with counsel and advice from folks like Brian in terms of how to think about architecting these environments. So again, our goal for customers is to give them complete flexibility and choice to use whatever application configurations and stacks that they want, whether it's something they're bringing on their own or whether it's something they're leveraging from third parties and ISVs like IBM. So what's the result of all this? So you saw how we can leverage deployments, how we can make a change, how we can take that deployment and essentially package it up in a way that it can be published. What the result of this is, when we asked Lily to kind of outline their process, what you see here in the then category are all the common steps that Lily used to have to go through every time a request for an environment came in from a scientist. And these probably look very familiar to this audience. They're the fairly typical steps that any IT department would have to go through when they're configuring servers to make them available to accept work. So things like, getting the actual physical or virtual resource, installing the packets, tweaking the conflicts. All of this requires overhead, and all of this takes time. And none of it is adding value to the organization and what the business model is all about at these companies. What Lily does now is they simply access pre-configured systems that are compliant. So they came and were built, and they're managed by the Lily IT department. Nothing's changed there. But they're pre-configured and accessible on demand with a click of a button. And they can do this once, or they can do it over and over again. What this resulted in is quite dramatic, and these are some stats that Lily shared with us, and we're very grateful that they did, because it really helps to put into real numbers what business agility is all about. What the 36,000 minutes represents, and for those of you doing the math at home, that's 5 business weeks. What the 36,000 minutes represents is the average amount of time it took their IT department to configure and present the environment that's ready to accept work from when the request first came in. So scientist submits a request, and it would take them on average 5 weeks to deliver that environment to a point where it was ready to accept work. They were able to bring that down to 30 minutes using RightScale and this vending machine type approach with that account isolation, the macroed up deployments, and the light user. And that really is what business agility is all about. Yes, saving 10, 20% of course is great. No one doesn't want to do that. But business agility is really about fundamentally changing the way that you do things. If you think about the impact on Lily's business for taking something that used to take 36,000 minutes down to 30, this is a fundamental shift in how they think about their business. And simply put, it's being able to look at things where IT is no longer a hurdle of any kind. It's no longer a procurement hurdle. It's no longer a configuration hurdle to get these environments up and running. So I encourage you to think about how that would change your business if you could achieve similar results. So I want to move into our final demo, and this will get more to multi-cloud and hybrid cloud. This is an ever-growing area of interest for enterprises that we deal with, and for very good reason, is they want to basically understand how can they help architect and take advantage of these multi-cloud and hybrid cloud configurations. The reasons are probably pretty obvious to this audience. You know, it's everything from enterprises wanting to better utilize the capacity that they already have. So if you have spare IT resources, you obviously want to get the most out of them. But also it becomes very, very important when you start to have to worry about things like geolocation, compliance to do with local laws and whatnot, performance if you need to make sure that those resources are in close proximity geographically to users. Price, of course, is a big issue. If you guys on the call here have used more than one region at Amazon, for example, you're aware that they actually price those differently. So you're going to pay a different amount in the East region versus the Singapore region. So there are lots of perfectly valid reasons why this notion of multi and hybrid cloud is very, very important to enterprise organizations. So where does RightScale fit in, and how do we help achieve this goal for enterprises? Well, first, you've seen in some of the demonstrations here in the dashboard, RightScale operates on this cloud resource pool type approach. So you can create isolation around one or more resource pools and orchestrate accessibility and deployments around that isolation. So very, very useful tool if you want to make sure your European subsidiary is only going to be accessing European-based cloud resource pools. Secondly is the underlying architecture of RightScale. So RightScale itself, although it's delivered as a software as a service, is a globally distributed architecture of multiple clusters that can function independently but also talk to one another. So when RightScale supports a new cloud resource pool, whether it's another region from Amazon, a hybrid cloud based on cloud.com, or Rackspace, another public cloud, an independent cluster of RightScale is deployed in that resource pool. That becomes very important to ensure that you have compliance and security parameters in place, so making sure that the account information and the keys are located on premise in the case of a hybrid cloud. But also it becomes important when you're architecting for high availability and disaster recovery. You can have your account structure operate in one cluster that's managing resources that are operating in another. The way we approach hybrid clouds from a deployment model is through a RightScale gateway. And some of you may be familiar with enabling technologies such as cloud.com and OpenStack and Eucalyptus. We have gateway types that support these cloud operating systems so that you can install and stand up your own private cloud, for example, based on cloud.com, and register and manage it using RightScale. And with that, we want to quickly show you our final demo here. And this demo assumes that you've already installed one of the enabling softwares that we support. So the example Brian's going to show you is going to be with cloud.com. It assumes you've already installed this software. It'll show you how you can register your private cloud with RightScale, and then we'll show you a hybrid environment that's actually running, and you can see how you would take advantage of that within the RightScale dashboard. So Brian?
Great. Thanks again, Josh. So as Josh said, in this final demo, we've assumed that you've already installed cloud.com on your local infrastructure, and now you want to go ahead and register that cloud with the RightScale Platform. So again, in this Publish Master Account, we're going to go to the Settings menu, and under Account, you notice that there's a Clouds tab. So we click on the Clouds tab, and this will show all the clouds that this account currently has access to. So there's the 5 AWS region, the 4 AWS regions, and the 5th one here, which is the Rackspace Cloud. You also notice this Add Private Cloud button. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to add a private cloud, and there's a Register My New Cloud.com cloud, and click on that. And on the next screen, we can go ahead and we'll call this our webinar private cloud. And the next step would be, if you had installed this, as the last phase of the installation process, you'd be presented with a registration URL and the admin API and admin secret keys, which you would go ahead and fill out at this time, and then click the Request Registration button, and that would register your cloud with the RightScale platform. Obviously, for this demo, we don't have these, so we're going to go ahead to an account where we've done this previously and created a hybrid cloud account using some of the infrastructure we have here at RightScale. So go to the Hybrid Cloud E account, and you'll notice that in here there is a Hybrid Cloud Demo deployment. So if we take a look at the Hybrid Cloud Demo, you notice that there's 2 application servers in this particular deployment. There's one of them is running in AWS US East, and the second one is running on the private cloud infrastructure. So what we have here is under the RightScale dashboard in a single deployment, we have an application server that's running in both the private cloud and running in the public cloud.
So Brian, it looks like it's using the same server template.
Yep, absolutely. So this is App Server 1 is a server template that we're using. So if we go ahead and we click on this, and then we'll notice that there's numerous tabs here. We'll take a look at the Images tab, and basically this shows that the images that this particular template is compatible with run on all of the AWS regions as well as the private cloud that we've created locally.
So this ties back to the methodology, and this is key when you talk about portability and simplicity. So you're using that same server template, and because you're dealing at a layer of abstraction above the image, RightScale is dealing with the heavy lifting of translating both from an API standpoint and also the resource behavior standpoint to deploy across multiple resource pools, in this case a private and a public.
Exactly. All you have to worry about is what do you want that server to be? What packages do you want it installed? And you don't have to worry about the underlying image. The RightScale platform takes care of that for you depending on the region or the resource pool that you launch it in.
Excellent. So very, very important value prop for enterprises, because for those of you that have investigated more than one cloud, you'll quickly realize that all these clouds are different. So APIs are one thing, but the cloud resource behavior is often the more difficult piece to manage around. So the RightScale platform and how it's architected and the methodology using server templates is a key way that we're able to stitch together multiple resource pools, including your own private cloud. So we want to finish up here and just highlight a few things about security. We touched upon some of this in the presentation, things like resource partitioning, account partitioning, credential management, automation. So because of RightScale's machine-to-machine interface, a lot of things that otherwise a human would have to get involved with can be automated. So you're not only launching, but you're configuring servers into production systems without a sysadmin ever having to access those machines. So added security is made available through that process. And then additionally, everything that we're monitoring can trigger alerts and remediation by the platform. So things like intrusion detection, we can take automated actions to terminate that instance, detach the storage volume, and a variety of different procedures. For those of you that are interested in a deeper dive into security, 2 things I wanted to call out. We've done recently an entire webinar dedicated to security in the cloud, and this was in cooperation with Amazon Web Services and HyperStratus, which is a partner of RightScale's and Amazon. So instead of spending a lot of time here, I'd call your attention to rightscale.com/webinars. The archive of that audio and video, that security webinar, is available, and please do take a look at it. There's a lot of good information in there about what you should be aware of when it comes to security in the cloud. And with that, we want to finish up here, and we'll take a few more questions, and we'll continue to stay on the line for a bit as questions keep coming in. So the first one is around the RightScale platform, essentially available as packaged software. So is the RightScale platform available for enterprise use, installable in the enterprise on-premise environment? So RightScale is architected as a platform. It is not packaged software. So the answer to that question is no, it's not available as packaged software. However, you'll recall the Cloud Gateway and the enabling technologies like Cloud.com. When you install Cloud.com or Eucalyptus or OpenStack, when that is fully released, you're installing that on-premise, and included in that is a portion of RightScale that is delivered as installable software. So the gateway is actually installed on-premise with that Cloud.com installation. And included in the RightScale gateway are some of the more sensitive aspects of the platform. So things like keys and account information are stored locally in the gateway. So with that, we're able to achieve a lot of the more sensitive compliance requirements in terms of where that data resides for enterprises that want to manage hybrid cloud environments. Another one I want to talk about here, I'll kick this over to you, Brian, which is our server templates stored in OEF formats or as a proprietary format. Maybe talk a little bit more about the scripts themselves and what they're comprised of and where that information is stored.
Sure, sure. Well, the server templates really are a collection of information, basically. They're basically a collection of the image information, as we showed, as to which images are going to be used for which regions, as well as a collection of the write scripts, the boot scripts, operational, and decommission. So the server templates themselves, you can think of them as more as a container, and it's not necessarily in any particular format, but just a container that you can add or delete these boot, operational, and decommission scripts, if you will, and they're stored obviously in the RightScale platform and the RightScale database.
Okay, next question is hybrid cloud again. Is there any sort of RightScale integration with VMware, specifically VMware's vSphere, or only Cloud.com and Eucalyptus? So if we jump back to the slide here, so RightScale has the most advanced support for Cloud.com and Eucalyptus. VMware's vCloud, so that's an evolution of their vCenter, as well as OpenStack, aren't as far along, but those are supported as well. We have done prototypes. We presented the first one at VMworld last year, so not this past one in August, but the one last year, and that will be supported. Also, it's worth noting that both Cloud.com and Eucalyptus can run on VMware ESX hypervisors. So you have that option as well. For enterprises that are interested in hybrid clouds, I'd highly encourage you to go try these out. So Cloud.com, Eucalyptus, and OpenStack all have open source versions of their product. And if you have a few spare cycles and a couple extra boxes, it's worth getting the learnings and the experience to just download that software and install a private cloud of your own. Give us a call when you're done, and we're happy to help you kick the tires and show you how to register it with our dashboard and get some learnings out of there. Next question, Brian, I'll kick this back to you. So if my users are not aware of the deployment feature, so the systems within RightScale, how can I take servers that are provisioned outside of a deployment and bring them into a deployment?
Okay. That kind of ties into the RightLink agent that we talked about earlier. So what I'm assuming is that you have servers that are running, like you said, outside of a deployment. You can then go ahead and, using the RightLink installer, you can install the RightLink agent on those particular servers. You can then rebundle them to create an image that, again, has that same server configuration footprint that you originally had, but now has the RightLink agent in it so that it can then communicate with the RightScale platform.
Great, thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. And then I guess another thing that's note around the kind of the account management side. So we had another question around accidentally provisioning servers. You know, how would you bring those accounts, those users, back underneath kind of the enterprise manager control? So Brian talked about how you bring those servers in. How you bring accounts in gets to the billing architecture within RightScale. So we support two different models. You can do single billing on RightScale, but also you can bring your own cloud credentials. And we run into this circumstance all the time with larger organizations. One in particular recently, they had told us they had 60 people that they knew of that were submitting personal expense reports to get reimbursed on infrastructure. And they wanted to get back control of this environment. So by using that enterprise manager structure that you saw us talk about earlier, you can bring all these accounts underneath one management system, and then as the admin, you can dictate the logical account groupings. So what's the master account? bring all of that cost control back into that environment and easily report on it, and furthermore, dictate what users can and can't do within each of their account environments. So very, very useful tool if you're looking to regain control. We had another question regarding additional clouds, specifically, do you support OpSource or Terramark clouds? That prototype on vCloud that I mentioned at VMworld was actually in conjunction with Terramark. So we do have some low-level support for the Terramark cloud, but it is not commercially available yet within RightScale, nor is OpSource. As a strategy and a practice, RightScale looks to support as many clouds as we possibly can. But as I alluded to earlier, the reality is all these clouds are quite different. And there's a lot of talk around API federation and standardization around syntax, but the more considerable challenge is how you deal with the variance in resource behaviors. And that's where RightScale spends a lot of time in helping customers take advantage of more than one cloud resource pool from more than one provider, all through a single platform. So look for more and more clouds to be added over time. We'd love to hear your thoughts and requests as to who you'd like to see prioritized. But as far as commercial availability, we do not yet currently support OpSource or Terramark. So while we're winding down, just wanted to remind everyone to please take a look at the webinar archive. You'll find the security webinar up there as well as this one. Give us about a day to get this one processed. We have several white papers that are available at rightscale.com/whitepapers, including topics such as load balancing in the cloud. That white paper was actually written by Brian. So he does a lot of work around best practices and best practice architectures for specific use cases. There's also a white paper up there on development and test, as well as how to think about TCO and cloud economics. So they're all completely free of charge and full of great content. And again, if you are going to be at Cloud Expo, please register and come to our meetup. It's completely free. There's going to be discussions from customers on there. We're going to have discussions from American Girl, division of Mattel. Electronic Arts will be speaking, and several others. So you'll get to hear about some real enterprise use cases. And we're also going to have several breakout sessions. One of those breakout sessions is going to be specifically on security. There's going to be another breakout session dedicated towards private and hybrid clouds, how you would actually create and manage them. And there'll be another breakout session on enterprise cloud computing. So lots of great content, and hopefully we'll see you all there. So with that, we're going to finish here. Any additional questions, just feel free to email them in to sales@rightscale.com, and we'd be more than happy to get those answered one by one. So thanks for listening, and bye for now. We'll hope to see you at the meetup. Take care.